Hi, and welcome to the next interview for Neurodiverse Sport. I'm Rhiannon Cooper, and today I am talking to Maddy Nutt. Could you introduce yourself, Maddy?
Hello, so I'm Maddie and I am a gravel cyclist, based normally in London, but I like to escape London when I can. And currently I'm training in Girona, which is much better than training in London. But yeah, I race gravel bikes full time, as a privateer. So I've got like my own sponsorships rather than riding for kind of a team. This year I'm riding for a collective within like a sponsor, but next year I'll have completely my own sponsors, and basically just means I get to choose my own calendar, choose my races, travel around the world, racing the events that excite me, and yeah, it's a great sport.
Nice. It sounds like you're doing the cycling equivalent of like a freelancer, I think.
Yeah, basically it's kind of like it's like very entrepreneurial. Um, yeah, it's like the cycling equivalent of like starting up a startup.
Yeah, so it comes with all the same sort of stresses, I guess.
Yeah, totally. I think I wouldn't say it's the easiest route in terms of like the whole element of you've got to sort of your own logistics, you've got to negotiate contracts. Like there's so much more than just like doing the sport, which I think is something that for me it really appeals to me because it means I still get to use my brain a bit as well as pedal. But I think for other people sometimes they're just like happy to just yeah, like just do the physical activity, just the sport.
Yeah. Do you think it's your... So I know that you sort of have always been, well, if you're autistic, you're always autistic. It doesn't just come. But do you think that your kind of uh, traits that you have been what's driven you to choose to go into cycling in this like privateer route rather than go in a more traditional team sense?
Yeah, I would say that there is an element that comes into it. I think that I really like having control over things that I'm doing and like sorting out. I think I like to like know exactly what's happening and like be in total control over it. So for me, if I'm part of a team, there's an element of someone else is booking things for me. Like they're choosing what flight I'm going on when I'm traveling. Whereas I really like to like have complete autonomy over all of that. And that means that like I mean I did have conversations with people about joining a team next year and I like thought about it quite a bit. And I just think that there are more opportunities then for me to come up with difficult like issues based off the fact that, say for example, if someone like booked a flight and then something then happened, or like there was like a sudden change and I didn't like that, like I can imagine like it's more likely that things could go wrong versus when like I feel like I'm in control. I think things are more likely to go right, and I think that definitely does come down to autism a bit. There's another. I mean, I do actually like working in a team and having teammates and that element. Like I think socially I do like that, but there is something about like being on your own, just doing your own thing, choosing your own calendar that does just work for me. I think I also there's another element which is when it comes to working with brands, I quite like working directly with brands, and I think there's an element of like I can just be my authentic self if I'm working directly with brands rather than like be someone within a team and having to try to like deal with more social dynamics versus just like authentically being myself with the brands that I work with.
Yeah, it sounds like you've set yourself up really to kind of embrace your authenticity through the way in which you are pursuing your cycling, which is pretty
Yeah,
nice. And I listen to you
definitely.
talk about other people like booking your flights and stuff, and oh, it for me, it's when plans change and things. And if someone else is in control, it's how those changes are communicated often can throw me. So I totally get the wanting to be a bit more in control of where you're going, what you're doing, and being the decision maker.
I think also there's a level of I trust myself more than other people. So like in a context where it's something like that. It's even when it comes to like say booking a flight, I would book a flight multiple days before a race because then that gives me time to get to the place, to maybe recce a bit of the course, to like feel like I'm quite a calm traveler, but I think it's just like I want to be there, I want to see a bit of the course, I want to like ground myself. I want to buy the food that I want to buy, make the dinner that I'm going to eat before the race. Like there's so many things where like I need that kind of extra time before a race. Whereas like if I'm going with a team, the team might book me on a flight the night before the race. I get there like 11, and then I'm not getting the amount of sleep that like in my head I need. And there's like so many elements like that. And as soon as, and I think this is the case with like a lot of athletes and like whether they're neurodiverse or not. But like I think when you throw an athlete off their kind of routine, you're like setting them up potentially for failure.
Definitely. I think it's almost, we have these little rituals in place that we like to do in order to be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm not, so my background is within sort of fitness and weight loss and things. So I'm not a competitive athlete, but I still have routines for things that I do on a daily basis, which if I can't do them for any reason, it's quite difficult to get in the right mindset to do the things I have planned. And I think that doesn't impact me in a way because I'm not going out there and competing and kind of trying to be the best, but it makes me not be the best version of me. And then couple that with the pressure of a race, and I can see that can be quite stressful if you fly in the night before.
No, totally. You just need that like the chill time to kind of like reset and like set yourself up for a good race. I had a race where someone else organized everything and like everything just went wrong. And like I ended up on the start line having not slept many hours, like maybe slept like 6 hours the night before and like 4 hours the night before that, like not feeling well. And then I had a bad race. And I feel like so much of that came down to like me not having control.
Yeah, I think that it is just making sure, and it is that thing for anybody, but making sure you have those things that you know are going to not enhance, but enable you to perform the best, like sleep is so important.
And some people are more relaxed about things like that. Like some people don't care if they get a good night's sleep the night before a race. I think a lot of people do, but
Yeah.
some people care less. And I think I know that I'm on the side of like caring quite a lot about like the logistics. And I also quite like doing it. Like I quite like organizing everything. So it doesn't hurt me to do it. Like I don't mind doing it. And I'm quite confident in my own competence. That's the other thing. Like I'm confident that like I'm gonna book a flight on the right day. Whereas like other people might book a flight on the wrong day or like things like that, like get the date wrong. I know that I'm gonna get the date right because I'm gonna check it 10 times before I book it.
Yeah, great way, because there's nothing, it's just you want everything to have a nice order and structure to it, and to plan it, I think makes a massive difference. I actually want to ask you about something which is just popped into my mind about was it like 9-hour race that you did without music? Something like that.
I've raced like 17 hours without music, but
17.
I like will do 9-hour training rides.
Okay, and do you do so? Because I just went for a walk before this. I needed like some fresh air, so I just went around the block for a little walk, and I just went without headphones, just like naked ears, I guess. And I can't bear the just background noise. But I guess, are you talking about having like anything like headphones on without playing anything, or just completely just
So
nothing there?
normally I have nothing. Like sometimes I'll use headphones, and I use bone conducting ones because I don't like in-ear headphones. But like most of the time I will just ride to like just the sound of, and like I would say that I can kind of like switch off background sounds and I just like have conversations in my own head, or like I don't even know what I think about, but like I will just be like thinking and speaking in my own head for the entire ride. And I think I cut out most background sounds. But I think most people I know would say that they would need music, or they would need someone to ride with. Like the idea of like riding on your own for that many hours is like torturous. But like I think for me, I can just like, I definitely like get into like an extreme like flow state when I'm doing activities. And like I used to have this when I studied. So like I was really good at exams because I would sit down and I could just like study, and like I could study and for a huge chunk of time, and then I'd like get up, go and exercise or something, or go and make a cup of tea, come back, like do it again. And I've always been able to kind of like get into this zone. And I think on the bike that I can do that so easily. And I'm like so relaxed, so happy, and just able to just kind of like do the job without thinking twice, really.
Sounds like it's almost a mindfulness exercise as well.
Almost, yeah, I would say so. I'd say like I actually like really I think I benefit sometimes from those longer rides. And like often the things I think about are like not like life questions, but like say if I've got like a problem I'm trying to solve, or like I'm trying to work something out in my head, or trying to work out some like a lot of the times like I have an idea of like, oh, maybe I should approach this brand to sponsor me. Or if I was deciding between two sponsorships for next year, for example, I would go out on a long bike ride and think about it for the whole bike ride. Like I'm very good at like solving problems in that headspace for like that amount of time.
That's got to be a skill, I think, to kind of, I don't know, go on a long ride with just yourself as company, but also be kind of working through, I guess, real life problems or challenges that you're facing. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite cool that you've been able to. I think it's like a mindfulness thing as well. Tie those together.
Yeah, a little bit. I used to do it with running. Like I'd be able to just run and like, because I ran before I cycled, and I would just run for ages and just like think.
So I know you said that you like to kind of train socially. So how do you find that kind of split, I guess? Or do you ever have times where you actually don't want to be social because you've got something you do want to like go into your zone and work on?
Yeah, I like try and balance it out because I think I do actually benefit from spending time with other people on the bike. I think it can be really nice to kind of share that with people. So I try and do a balance where like if I've got a specific session or like intervals that like wouldn't work with riding with someone else, then I'll ride on my own. And like sometimes even I'd say to a friend like, this is what I'm doing, you can join me if you want, but I am going to follow my plan. And then when I've got like a lot of the time when I've got like an endurance ride, unless it's loads of hours and then no one wants to come with me, but if it's like 4 hours or something, then I'll just kind of message friends. But I prefer to ride one-on-one with people. I like to ride with like one friend, because then you can like spend that time chatting and there's no kind of like social dynamics there. Like it's you, one person, and you're just chatting to them. And I find that like I kind of thrive in that setting, whereas like I find the logistics and the complications and the dynamics of like going out in a bigger group sometimes like overwhelming, and I'd prefer to just ride with one person. So I have a lot of friends who are like cycling friends who are we just ride the two of us. Like sometimes like I maybe have like there's two girls who I ride with in London quite a lot, and like I've then linked them up, and sometimes we maybe ride as a three, but three is a really awkward number for cycling because then it's like two people in front, one person behind. So like a lot of the time I just ride one-on-one with someone else.
It does take away the social dynamics, definitely. So it's like
Yeah.
literally spending time with a group of people, which a lot of neurodivergent people struggle with because of that kind of the expectations and the eye contact and the follow-up questions and things. And yeah, putting that, I never considered how that would move across into kind of sport, really, but it does.
No, it definitely does. I think because also cycling is such a social sport, and people do like group rides, like you do group cafe rides, and I just find I'm just so much happier just riding with one person. Like actually in COVID, the rule was you could only ride with one person for a chunk of time, and that was so ideal because that's kind of when I started riding with. I'd only been riding for a little bit beforehand, but I started riding with only one other person, and kind of since COVID, I've just done that. Like it's very rare that I'll ride in a bigger group than just two of us. But I just find it's perfect because you can have a proper conversation with the person, and like you don't make not that I do struggle a little bit with eye contact sometimes, but like you ride side by side, so you're looking straight ahead. So it's actually really easy for someone who's like autistic to have like a really open conversation with someone because you're so like you're riding ahead, your legs are kind of distracted. I actually find I'm most open on a bike than any other conversations I have in my life. Like I think I open up more to people I cycle with about more intimate things or like more personal things than I would ever speak to with someone off the bike. I was gonna say you're like doing something like shared, and you're like sharing that experience, and like that you're distracted by like your leg movement and things like that. And I think it's such a environment that brings out those kind of conversations.
Yeah, I think It makes sense. And the reason I started smiling is I was imagining, so I can ride a bike, but I'm talking not well. I kind of used to ride my bike from where I lived to uni and back.
Yeah.
That was it. And not, it wasn't great. It was functional cycling,
Yeah.
I would call it. But I was thinking how kind of comical it would be to try and conduct an interview on a bike, like going around a track or something. But it is a really interesting thought when you're not kind of focusing in on a person's features and face and how they are, I guess, responding to what you're saying.
Yeah.
That lack of seeing that you're not then, as an autistic person, assessing what they're thinking, how they're feeling. You're in just this zone of where you do feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah. You just speak. I mean, I do listen when I'm on the bike, but I would say I think I'm thinking less. What is the other person? How are they responding to what I'm saying? Because you can't assess. There's nothing to kind of read. It's just what they're saying back. And so it is almost easier.
It makes sense, especially if you do go to that place in your mind when you're riding, that then it kind of does lead you into those more open and honest conversations. And I think that's something that sport does is, I guess, brings people together, but in a way in which you feel comfortable, maybe, if it's something that you are passionate about, kind of like finding a place where you feel you belong and you obviously feel like good on a bike.
Yeah, no, totally. I also think like a lot of people in cycling are similar. Like a lot of the people I ride with are a little bit neurospicy. So like
Nice.
it makes it so easy, like so easy to build those friendships as well.
And what was it that led you to cycling then?
I was originally, well, I originally played volleyball. I was a swimmer as a kid, then I played volleyball, and then I was kind of like looking for a little bit of meaning, and I was jogging quite a bit, and I started like joined my old triathlon club because I did a bit of triathlon when I was younger, and I didn't have a bike, and I would just run and swim train, and I got to a point where I was like, oh, I probably should get a bike, and I just like really quickly fell in love with it. Like I would just go out on rides, and I realized you could ride for hours socially because like running you can build up to a point where you could ride for hours. Like I did build up to a point where I could like jog a decent distance kind of casually, but you can't socialise, like you can't like chit chat the whole way. I guess you kind of can, but you can't really like sit, have a coffee and cake and then keep going again. I've tried and it doesn't work very well with running. Whereas with cycling, like you can literally go out for like 8 hours. Like the longest ride I've done was like 17 hours. So I think it was that element of you can spend so much time doing it. And I got like quite a lot faster, quite quicker. And I realized I was better at cycling than I was at running. And then, yeah, I just kind of fell into it a little bit. Yeah. And I started racing. I got kind of pushed into doing racing. I didn't really want to do it. And I didn't enjoy road racing. And then I ended up finding like gravel racing and ended up loving it. And yeah, I'm now kind of quite deep into it.
So for me, because I don't know cycling massively, so gravel would be like cross country, kind of out in like, yeah,
What's
places.
like the running equivalent?
Yeah, or yeah, I guess running equivalent.
I would say it's the equivalent of like UTMB, like those kind of trail races. So
Okay.
it's like endurance, so it's much longer. A lot of the time it's a lot longer. Sometimes they can only be like 4 hour races, but like sometimes they're like 17 hours or whatever. So like much longer races, off road. So yeah, I would say the equivalent would be like UTMB. That
Okay.
kind of like trail running.
And so when you started doing your cycling, it was from your triathlon kind of, and then you realized that actually you really like this. So then you tried the road cycling. That sort of wasn't really where your interest lay, so you pursued this. Was there any moment of you thinking, oh, I'm not going to continue finding it until you found the gravel cycling? Or was it just you knew that cycling's something you love and you're going to find the right environment to enjoy it more?
I think I just loved riding my bike and like I loved riding my
Okay.
road bike. And I don't think it needed to be racing for me. So like I was happy just like cycling loads before I found a type of racing I loved. Because I think I did some fixed crits as well, which is like track racing a track bike on a circuit, which is so dangerous. And I can't believe that was like one of the first kinds of cycling racing I did. But yeah, I think I wasn't kind of searching for a racing that I loved. I just kind of accidentally did a race and realized I was good at it and liked it. And then kind of ended up doing it. But I did give road racing a go for a good try. I just found like I didn't really like the dynamics of it. It's a lot more tactical. And I prefer just like racing really hard all day, like just working really hard. Because gravel is more like a effort of a TT. So like it's more like a consistent effort all day versus like team dynamics and like tactical moves and like surges and sprints and like trying to get away, things like that. Like I think road racing is a lot more technical, whereas like gravel racing is more exciting in terms of the terrain, and you've got technical elements, but like you're just working really hard all day. And I think I like that sense of like accomplishment.
You can, it's like switch on, this is what you're here to do, and you can maintain that all day.
Yeah, exactly. And like whatever happens, you like finish and you're like, I did a really good effort. Whereas on the road, you could be like in a situation where you're not working that hard because like someone's got away and like the bunch then slows down. So like you could end up just having a day where you're just like sitting along, like you could have a conversation. Whereas like gravel, like in a race, you just go hard, like you empty yourself. And I think I find a real sense of achievement in just emptying myself.
I think that's a really interesting thing. I want to ask, do you have teams in gravel racing as well, or is it all privateers?
There are teams now, like it's quite a recent thing, but there aren't team dynamics yet. So there are a few teams, but like I wouldn't say people work together. And like if it's happened, it's been like the odd scenario, and you don't get that much benefit from working with someone else because riding on gravel is so much harder anyways that you get less of a benefit from someone helping you. So there isn't that dynamics yet. I don't know if it's one of those things that's like a question people get asked quite a lot. It's like, do you think that gravel's going in that direction where there are going to be like more teams? And like, I don't know, but I don't think so, just because the sports come from a place where everyone's privateers.
But it would be really interesting if the dynamics were to change, because it would, and I'm not talking from a technical point of view, obviously, but it would massively change the dynamics, I suppose, if you had teams going. And then potentially that pressure to join a team, I guess, would come into play as well.
Yeah, I think also if that's where like, say in terms of like making a living, if making a living is only found in a team, then that's when I'd have to think about that more. And it's something I definitely would consider. Like I'm not completely like I'll never join a team. I think in a context where I think there are definitely benefits to being in a team, like the support you'd get. Sometimes it depends on the team as well. Like, but like some teams would have like a nutritionist and things like that. Like there's extra level of support than you get when you're on your own and you're sorting out all your own stuff. So I'm not completely against it, but yeah, it would be interesting to see if it did as a discipline sway more that way and I had to kind of get into a team, like how I would enjoy that. But I was on a team through 2-3 years ago with Mikey, which is how I met Mikey, and I did actually quite enjoy that. There were aspects of that I did enjoy, but it's so dependent on who's on the team, which is another thing that's so like I think I was just really lucky that the team was like a group of really, really nice people. But I find teams like harder in terms of there are more personalities that you have to like understand and get to know and like work with. Whereas like when you're just a privateer, you can just like, if you want to travel with a friend, you can travel with a friend. If you want to travel on your own, you can travel on your own. And I like having that like freedom.
Yeah, freedom, control, flexibility to shape it exactly how you want and need.
Exactly.
No, it sounds like you would almost have to rewrite the narrative of teams for you to feel maybe comfortable going into one.
Yeah, I think I would have to like have a big say in who's in the team. I think it would be an element of it. But also I'd probably want to have a certain level of control in terms of like my own personal logistics. Like I think I'd be happy to ride for a team if they let me travel earlier to races or like leave a little bit later, because also like I race gravel because of the like quality of life and like the kind of lifestyle you get for it. And that to me is like, I travel to cool races in different countries, I do the race, and then like I go and explore the country a bit, I experience a little bit of like, I learn a bit about culture, or I meet some of the people. And I think if I travelled with a team, a lot of the time they're trying to cut costs, so it's just you fly in, you fly out. And I think I'd lose that element of, which is one of the reasons why I love what I do, because I get to travel to really exciting places. And when I was with the team a few years ago, like we would very much like go to a race. Like I can remember going somewhere and not even having one coffee in the town we were staying at.
That just sounds awful. Sorry, I have to say,
like
coffee's so important.
And like I love finding nice coffee places. Like that's definitely something that like is like an interest of mine, is to like find cool cafes or like cool bakeries where I travel. And like if I'm going with a team, I'm not going to be able to do that necessarily.
And it's those things that put you in a really good place mentally, I guess, and then you can perform your best when you're on the bike.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm more relaxed if I'm like, oh, the day before the race, I'm going to go sit in a nice cafe for like an hour and just have a nice coffee. Like definitely more relaxed around racing and just happier as well.
Good. It's really important to be happy. So yeah, it's very important. Do you find when you have been maybe doing more social type riding, that masking plays like quite a part in how you are when you're, say, not on a bike, on the down times and things?
As in like when I'm doing social riding with groups of other people?
Yeah, so say if you do like a ride to a cafe or something with people, do you do that? I'm assuming maybe.
Yeah, sometimes. I don't do it that often. Like most of the time it would just be with one other person. But I find like if I'm in like a big group setting, I find it quite tiring. But mostly off the bike. Like I'd say like on the bike, I don't find that challenging, because you're only, to be honest, on the bike, even when you're in a group, you're only ever with one person at a time. Like you're only ever like having a conversation with one person at a time. What I find hard is like working out like when I need to like move and talk to someone else, or when someone needs to move and talk to me, or like things like that. But I'd say it's more like off the bike. Like say if I was on a group ride and then we went to a cafe, it's like those kind of dynamics there that is harder, and like where I have to like make a real effort. But I feel like because it's something I've done since, well, forever, I am actually quite good at it. So I think in those settings I probably seem completely fine, and like it's easy for me because I am a very social person. I'm like a very social person, but then when I get home I might be knackered.
Do you have to schedule that decompression time afterwards when you've been social?
Normally I don't schedule it, but then I end up having to need it. Or I mean, I try not to schedule too much now. Like I definitely feel like recently I've had a few situations where like I've done too much and then I've like completely burnt out, or like been just like wiped out. And now I just like try not to organize too much on my calendar, because I'm like, then I know that I can have that alone time if I don't organise things every day. And I try and keep my evenings free. Like I tend not to do stuff in the evening because that's like my downtime. So I tend to only socialise like in the morning, which is like so unusual. I think most people socialise in the evenings, but like I would prefer to have like go on a ride with one other person, maybe have a coffee with them, then go home, work, or like do some admin or whatever, and then like I spend my time in my kitchen for like an hour, 2 hours cooking something nice, and then just like chill with my girlfriend, and then just like sit on the sofa. And that's like and I don't even like watch TV. Like I'll sit on my sofa and like maybe plot a route for the ride the next day, or like reply to a couple of emails. But it's just that time of like not having to travel to a social event, or like not having to socialize with a group of people that like I really appreciate. And the amount of times I turn stuff down, like I feel like I never get FOMO and I don't care. And like sometimes I feel bad because like it could be related to a sponsor or something. I'll say like there's an event and it's like, if it's related to a sponsor, normally I'll go if they've asked me to go. But if it's like, say it's like a party, like a cycling party, which happens, like there's like a party with a certain sponsor at a certain location, I'll just be like, I'm okay. Like, because I know if I go, I'm going to find it really hard and I'm going to find it exhausting and I'm going to get home late, not sleep properly, and just be wiped out. And like the actual event I'll find hard as well. Whereas like, and I think it's taken a while for me to be like, I don't need to do these things just because other people enjoy them doesn't mean that I enjoy them. And I'm quite good at now being like, I don't want to, like, no, I don't want to go to that thing because I'm not going to enjoy it.
I heard a really interesting thing. I can't remember who said it, and it's probably one of those terms that just is a term now. But someone said they don't get FOMO, they get JOMO. It's like
Yeah, I've
joy
said
of
that
missing
before.
out.
Yeah, I really get JOMO. I love it. Like, I genuinely can see stuff online where, like, people are at, like, a certain pub or a certain party and it's, like, cycling people or something. And I'm like, God, I'm so glad I'm at home alone right now. Like,
I so relate.
genuinely, genuinely, I've never felt FOMO. The only FOMO I would feel would be, like, say, for example, there are two races that clash and I really want to do both of them and obviously I've got to choose one and I maybe see content from people at the other race, then maybe I'd get FOMO because I'd be like, oh, like I could have done that race but I did this race. But like I've never got FOMO over any social occasion ever.
Yeah, I am with you there. I am on the team normalize saying no to social events if you don't want to do it. And I often, me and my partner will sit down and we'll scroll social media and whatnot, and we'll see things and people going and doing things with people. And that just sounds awful. So we like we have like a very structured, routined life, and we like our own company, and that's where we're happy.
Yeah.
So I can definitely relate. But I don't like cooking. But you seem to also enjoy spending time in the kitchen.
Yeah, I love cooking. I think that's like my side passion alongside cycling. Like I'd say the things I'm most passionate about are like cycling, cooking, cafes, bakeries, making routes, and that's probably it. Like,
While sipping coffee.
yeah, I've got like a small handful of things I'm very passionate about. But I think like I do think sometimes I think about other adults and like how people don't seem to be as passionate anymore. Or like you meet people and you're like, all they can talk about is what they do for work and that's it. Like they work and then they go to the pub with friends or they have brunch with friends and like there's nothing that, and I feel like I've got a few passions that like really drive me in like a quite an autistic way, but like they are things that like completely drive my day-to-day life. But I think I'm so much happier because I've got passions.
And you're following them. So
Yeah,
you're doing
completely.
it.
Like I'm like doing the cycling full time and then I always give myself time or like I really try to like cut out time to cook every day. Like I will prioritize that. If I had the opportunity to like take some like paid work for an hour or something and it was like over the time where I was planning on cooking, normally I'd cook instead. Like I'd say no, I'm not free then because like I've carved that time in my head, like that's my cooking time.
You have to make time for the things that give you energy, though. And if cooking gives you energy, then it's important that you almost like safeguard that block of time, I think.
Yeah,
So
totally.
it's a good way to do it.
I always think it's funny when like most people don't view that as such a priority and they're like happily just like eat food out or like order a takeaway, but like to me that's like such a sacred thing that like I wouldn't sacrifice it. And when I have to because I'm really busy or I've got to go into London for an event, like recently there was a cycling event in London that was like 3 days long and that was really tough, like not being able to cook a nice meal every night. And like I found that really challenging, like just having to choose something from like somewhere out in London just to take away. Like I hated that because like part of my routine is like making a nice meal every night and I really enjoy the whole process of it.
And is that more so? I don't know what the event is that you're referring to, but if you're in a team with your gravel cycling, those sort of situations would probably come up more and more, I'd assume.
I don't think they necessarily would. So this was like a cycling show. So I was speaking on a panel one day. So it was like all the brands like all around in cycling were at one event in London, like showing their stuff, and like it was like super social, like everyone was walking around talking to everyone, and like I could barely walk through a room without bumping into someone I know. Like it was like very intense socially. And I went for, so last year I went all 3 days, and this year I was just like, I know I can't do that. Like having done it last year, I really struggled. So I just did like a day and a half. And I made sure that the day I was speaking on the stage, I didn't go before that, because I knew that I would be like socially wiped if I like went and like mingled and then went on stage. So I like stayed, like I arrived later so that I just went straight on stage and then I could mingle afterwards. And that actually worked really well. But I think if I was on a team, it wouldn't necessarily, it would maybe be less even, because I'm more likely to be on a stage if I'm like a privateer and then I've got more of a personal brand, than if I was in a team. I probably would have less opportunities like that.
And I guess so as a privateer, because you're, I guess, solely responsible for your sponsorships and partnerships and things, it's almost, there's more expectation on you to go to those things, or not expectation, but I guess in order to show face, it's going to them.
Yeah, totally. That's definitely a case of like FaceTime is important in those kind of contexts. But it's, and I've worked out my middle ground is like, I can go, but I need to go for like short periods of time, because it is quite intense socially and it is knackering.
Do you think that impacts your, not sponsorships, but when you're, I guess, say you're looking for a new sponsorship, do you find yourself having to justify why you might not go to an event and things like that? Or are most of them quite understanding if you're kind of having to change things because of kind of safeguarding your sanity?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had that come up, just because I think I've never been asked too much to do too much, and it's all been stuff that I've been able to do. I think I've never had a situation where I'm like, no, I really can't do that. And things like speaking at this event, it was quite easy to like kind of work around like how much I'd be there, and no one asked me to be there the whole time. So that was easier. But yeah, I think on the whole, like sometimes I have to like lead a social ride or something, and like I'll just make sure like I carve out time either side to kind of decompress, and I'll like be very good socially for those few hours, dying on the inside partly most of the time, but like getting through it. And then yeah, I've ticked that off the list, and I think I've never had any issues where like a sponsor's been like, oh, you weren't great on that social ride or whatever.
Just takes it out of you.
Yeah, it just takes it out. I think that's the thing, like I can handle most situations very well socially, but they're just so energy sapping. Like I think the way that I feel in those social interactions isn't how everyone else feels. Like I'm very much like fully analysing everything and trying to work out exactly like what to say next, like how to react, like what they're thinking, what they're feeling. And sometimes I can't read it, and that's even more confusing, because I'm like, I don't know how they're feeling about this interaction. I think I wrote in the blog I wrote something about like my brain is commuting at like 100 miles per hour. Like I feel like it is in those situations. And it probably doesn't look like it. Like I know it doesn't look like it, but a lot of the time I am just to kind of like survive through them.
It's just that mask we have put on to survive, isn't it? I think when you grow up, I mean, I think, am I right in thinking that you kind of, are you late diagnosed, or you kind of have just, I'm not sure. Tell me about your diagnosis story.
So I've never officially been diagnosed, which is something where like I've like spoken to people about it, and I'm just like, I don't see the necessity to, basically, because when I was younger, I remember like saying something to my mum when I was like 11, because I was like, oh, like I said something like, oh, do you think I'm autistic? And I did like an online, like, you know, you do like those online quizzes, and I scored like 39 out of 40, and I was like annoyed that I didn't score 40 out of 40, because classic, like I gotta get 100% in everything I do.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, oh, I only scored 39 out of 40, and she was like, yeah, I never got you to get a diagnosis because like it was so obvious, like I didn't need to. So like I kind of grew up with that kind of attitude, so I was like quite aware of it when I was maybe like 11, 12, but it was not something I would ever say to anyone. And then, yeah, it's just kind of something like I've known about myself, and like I've spoken to people, and I've only really spoken to my like closest friends really. Like if it comes up in conversation or someone says something, like I will say like, oh yeah, no, I am a bit autistic, and like it comes up quite a lot at home just because I think I mask less at home.
That's the thing.
And
I really think that's the thing, masking less at home.
like I can be very critical. Well, I can just be very honest. I'm just very black and white about everything, and like I can be very honest. So like my partner can like wear an outfit, and I can turn around and be like, "Oh, you're going to a fancy dress party," like not thinking, "Oh, maybe that is the outfit that she's wearing out the house," just
Oh,
because she
cringed inside.
literally like I can remember saying that, being like, "Oh, is it a fancy dress party?" And then I was like, "Oh, like I should have thought." But like
Just
things like
pops
that,
out
like,
though.
yeah, it pops out, or like I'm like, oh, I don't really like that, like jumper or whatever, and I'm not always criticizing her clothing, but I think I can be very quick to say like I don't like something, or just like my honest opinion about something without thinking. Whereas like outside of home, I would say I'm a lot more careful.
You're like always kind of aware that you might say something like that, so you like filter everything that comes out.
Yeah, I feel like I really filter. Whereas at home, if I'm tired, I don't filter. And then that's where it comes up quite a bit. But yeah, it's something that I have thought about whether it would be worth getting like an official diagnosis. But then I'm also like, what, I wait a year for someone to say, yeah, you are. And it's just like someone's subjective opinion at the end of the day. Like you're just filling in, like I'd fill in a questionnaire like I filled in online. Like I've always had, even like when I was growing up, I was literally like obsessed with maths, obsessed with numbers, like very much like a certain type of autism that's like very academic. And so almost it's easier to mask because you're not struggling at school because you're like super academic but super obsessed with things. But then like I like always found socially school quite hard. Like primary school, I didn't really have many friends. Like I just played football with the boys every lunchtime. None of the girls. I didn't get on with any of the girls apart from one other girl who played football with me. And then like secondary school was an all-girls school, and that was really hard because there were like so many social groups, and I like always struggled with group dynamics. Like, and I think it's taken me until I'm an adult where almost I feel like as an adult, and I don't know what the kind of necessarily science is with this, but I feel like I've become more autistic with age. And I don't know if this is a thing that other people experience, but I feel like as I've got older, I've almost become maybe more aware of it, and like more aware of my differences versus other people, and like more aware of things like hypersensitivity. Like I'm very hypersensitive to like certain textures, certain sounds, even like smells. But like I didn't notice that when I was younger, and it's only like recently where I'm like, I mean, having COVID, I was hypersensitive to smell so badly. Whenever I get COVID, like I can't deal with the smells that I can smell. But yeah, I'm not sure whether it's just me being more aware of it or me getting older and then being like more like, no, I actually am quite different. Like my brain is quite different to those around me.
It's a really interesting thing. Someone should probably do some research on it, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I have this smell thing. I think when it comes to diagnosis with autism, you can't medicate it anyway. So it's
Yeah.
unlike other things where you need a diagnosis to go get medication. And the reason I mention it is because my ADHD medication has made my sense of smell so sensitive. It's crazy the difference. And I think that for me, that has then made my autistic traits so much worse. It's like the benefits of the medication are really good, and I would rather take it and deal with the side effects. But I'm definitely more autistic now when I'm on the medication or remember to take it than when I'm not. And it's crazy. I'm so much more sensitive now than I was, but I had no idea I was autistic till about 2 years ago. So it's interesting to know that you also, mine's probably medication related, but you've also had like this increase of related things happen. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I don't know necessarily what it is, or like what it's linked to, but I definitely feel like it's something that I'm more aware of as an adult than I was when I was younger, and maybe perhaps why a lot of women get diagnosed so late. Because like I know quite a few people have been diagnosed later, and like maybe it is something that like it just is more like obvious as you get older.
Yeah, because it's less obvious for women when we're younger, which is why
Yeah,
it's so chronically underdiagnosed for children, I think. And actually, if when you're 11, even if your mum had taken you for an assessment, you may well have been told you don't have it anyway.
yeah, that's
So
also
there's always that, and I think that it is really interesting to see. I don't want to say the tables are turning, but more and more people are getting that late diagnosis, which is really interesting, and maybe there's something to do with just hormones and gender, I think. So
I think with the diagnosis thing as well, is it's like, is it going to benefit me to have an official diagnosis? It doesn't really change anything. Like, I feel like the way that my brain functions, I know how it functions, and I know, and like, I don't necessarily need to have someone else tell me that for me to know that. So I don't think it would necessarily help me in any way. And as you were saying, like, if it was something that then there was medication that would make life easier, but like anything that makes life easier as like an autistic person you can do without medication. Like I could get like, or like avoid certain situations, or like anything that, yeah, any of these kind of like, I want to say life enhancements, but things that make the normal world easier for an autistic brain you
yeah,
can
like your
do
coping
without.
strategies.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's why I went for diagnosis was because I basically at that time I worked for companies and I wanted some protection at work. That was it really.
This is something I was reflecting recently, and I think I've only come to the realization recently, but I worked in the city for like 5 months, and I feel like part of the reason I found that so hard actually was autism, and I think I didn't realize at the time, but I think the thing that I came up against was I didn't care about FaceTime in the office, and I didn't care about like the social stuff. So, for example, like people going for drinks after work and like smoozing up the bosses or whatever, and like everyone feeling like who can stay in the office the longest. I would just get my work done, and it would be done within like an hour and a half of me sitting at the desk. So I would maybe 2 hours. So I would get in for 7, finish my work by 9, and then I'd be like, why am I sitting here like doing nothing? And I think that was like my brain being like, this makes no sense to me. This isn't logical. Like I've done my work. Like I can surely, like one day I went to the gym at lunch, came back, and like the girl one position senior to me was just like, you absolutely cannot do that. Like you can't go to the gym in the middle of the day. You're not senior enough. And like, I think the reason I kind of butt heads with the job quite a bit, and that kind of job was like autism in a way. Me just being like, I don't understand why all these people are like sitting here past 7 p.m. every night just because they want to like pretend that they're working. And like when I was done work, I was done with my work, and when I was working, I was super hyper focused, got everything done. So I think on reflection now, that's something I've like thought about recently. The reason I found that job so hard, or like not hard, the actual job was easy, which was part of the problem. But I think the reason I found it so challenging was actually due to that. And like that was my differences with other people who they were really easy, like able to fit into like the social dynamics. Whereas I was like, why am I doing this?
That is something I hear all the time with like friends that are autistic as well. It's when you're working for a company that have these very rigid, not necessarily rules, but just unspoken things that people do or don't do. It's
Mm,
it's really challenging when you're autistic and you don't get it or don't want to do that, or it's overwhelming to do the drinks after work. I hate drinks after work.
yeah.
Awful. Don't drink alcohol and you're expected to small talk with people who really don't care about you. It's horrid.
Yeah.
It's not
I know.
nice.
I don't know. I don't understand in general. Like, I don't understand why anyone likes things like that. Like, why?
Do you think some people do enjoy it, or do you think they pretend?
I think they must enjoy it because why do they do it? Like, people who go to the pub on a evening with people they don't really know, like, genuinely, they must enjoy it. Otherwise, why would they put themselves in that situation?
Yeah, I just can't imagine it. It
No.
just sounds
I
horrible.
hate any situation that's like networking or like, and I noticed this when we did I think it was before unis when we were like choosing unis at school. We would do like these events where you had to like walk around and talk to different unis. Those events just like made me feel so uncomfortable, and I hated nothing more than doing that kind of thing. But other people were like thriving, walking around, getting all the leaflets, talking to everyone. And I was just like, this is hell. Like, why are we doing this?
Just we're expected. It's all the societal expectations that we're supposed to do these things and we're supposed to enjoy them. But actually, you cannot enjoy them and you can do the things that you want to do instead.
Yeah. And I feel like, yeah, this is the work thing where I was like, why am I sitting in an office for 12 hours doing work for 2 hours and then pretending to work for the other 10 when I could be riding my bike? And that was like, I think it just came down to that at the end of the day.
I think that it definitely sounds like you found a much more kind of fulfilling kind of career, I guess, than what you were doing before.
Yeah, I'd say it's fulfilling, but it's not stable. Like, I found it, I found something to do for as long as I can that I absolutely love, but I know that it's like not secure and stable, and I know that it's like the longevity isn't that great. And at some point I'll need to figure out doing something else, but for as long as I can kind of like sustainably do it, I will do it.
Nice. That sounds good. Um, I just always like to kind of end, and I'm aware of the time, I don't want to keep for too long, but with, I suppose, how would you encourage anyone who is perhaps thinking about taking up cycling or wanting to get started? How do people go about that? Like neurodiverse or neurotypical? Just what's the
Yeah.
first step for people to get involved?
Well, cycling's quite a difficult one just because like the barrier to entry is quite high in the equipment you need. But I would say like finding a secondhand bike is probably the best way to get into it. So like there are lots of sites and like Facebook groups and things like that where you can find quite good equipment for like lot lower prices, which is I think the main problem with getting into cycling is like the money involved in it. And it's yeah, it's getting the equipment and then showing up to like there are a lot of groups out there who kind of specialize in like getting people going and like beginner group rides, and I think that's the best place to start with cycling because it it is quite hard in the sense that like you have to learn how to fix a puncture and things like that, and a lot of the time these things you can learn with other people, and like doing it socially is a great place to start. Like I can't imagine saying to someone grab a bike and take yourself out on a route. Like they're not going to know how to use a bike computer and things like that. Like there are a lot of steps until you can get to a point where you can ride on your own. So I would say yeah, finding a local group and finding an inexpensive way to get the equipment.
I used to have a horse, and so I totally understand how things can cost money to get into because you have to physically have a horse or have a bike. So I get that. I did wonder as well if somebody is wanting to do that and they are neurodiverse, um, would they be welcomed kind of to beginners groups and things? Would it be kind of something that, yeah, they shouldn't feel their neurodivergence could impact their ability to do?
Well, I think the what I was saying earlier about how in cycling, even when you're in a group, you're normally riding two abreast. I think that's something where like I feel like being neurodivergent, it is less of a difficulty. I think it actually is quite a nice sport for that, and like the whole you don't have to make eye contact with someone. So if that's something you find hard, you don't have to. I mean, half the cyclists I know have ADHD. So in terms of like if you've got ADHD, I feel like you'd probably find a lot of people with the same form of neurodivergence as you in a cycling club. But yeah, I would say that like cycling is a really welcoming sport. And someone said to me once, and I think this is quite a fair point, they were like, cycling groups are like so weird because think of a load of people who like to just spend time on their own and just do an activity on their own, cyclists, and then they put themselves together and then they awkwardly do that together. And I was like, that's quite a good description. Like it's the people who pick up cycling tend to be quite interesting people and not the most boring people. And I think yeah, cycling groups in general are like super welcoming. So I wouldn't hesitate to encourage people to join.
Amazing. I think that's a really nice kind of thing to end on. So, yeah, anyone listening who's thinking about doing it should just try it and see, because a lot of people are probably feeling the same until they're there.
Exactly. I think joining any group is really scary, but there are always going to be other people in that situation.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, thank you so much for your time, Maddy. It's been great to find out a bit more about you and kind of your journey.
Thanks so much.